Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday to you. It's a wonderful whiskey Wednesday, of course, with Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we talk Gunpla and 3D printing and all kinds of hobby nonsense. Last week was a lot of fun. We had a guest in third chair for once, which was
Yeah,
pretty exciting. But of course,
that was.
oh yeah, joining me as always is the effervescent Adam Blue. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good. For this Whiskey Wednesday, I'm doing the water, and I don't know if I mentioned this one yet. This one is usually hard to find. It's the coconut pineapple. It's
Ooh,
hard to find, but it is the best.
coconut
So when I
pineapple.
see it on Amazon Fresh, I like stock up on it.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up because and you guys are just gonna have to deal with drink talk. Drink talk is like a part of every week now. I
Yeah.
am double fisting here with some of these polar seltzers. This is a new flavor to me, pink apple and lemon, which was part of what they call their Northeast flavors of the
Oh,
Northeast collection. And I was like, I have no idea what pink apples and lemon have to do with the Northeast. If you guys are from Boston or, anywhere in Massachusetts for that matter, let me know if pink apple and lemon is a flavor combination that's common up there in the Northeast.
yeah. I haven't heard of that one, and I get polar every once in a while, so I'll have to look at that and try it out.
Yeah, yeah, I've got a few new seltzer brands that I'm looking forward to trying out, which sounds so dumb. Like, oh,
It
I
does,
love
but it's like
seltzer.
the most. Yeah, there's something about it. It's like the most refreshing beverage. And you don't. There's no guilt of soda. There's no
Yeah,
sugar of the juice.
something about the bubbles just is
Yeah,
nice.
exactly.
But hey, good to see you guys all in chat. I see Robert, I see Jedi Sayla, Zeonic Shadow not joining us this evening. I see Shirt Lad, I see Dr. Squigums. Good to see you guys. There's even this guy Gundam Explained in the chat. So I mean that's a little pretentious to call yourself Gundam Explained, but
I know, right? Like, who's this guy think he is? Although Zionic Shadow will be here, but just not able to chat.
yes.
So we can make fun of him, and he won't be able to defend
Oh,
himself.
that's even better.
Except maybe for later in Discord. Um, which, hey, if you guys aren't in the Discord, check out the Discord. It's always fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, check out got links to both the Gundam Explained Discord and Midnight Hatter Discord in the links down below, which for those of you who are either sub to me on Patreon or part of the Discord, you probably have already seen some of the progress pics on this 3D printed resin kit that I've been working on. I've talked about it a lot on stream. I'm pretty sure. So what we're looking at here today is, and I'm just going to make sure that my camera's looking good before I dive into any discussion about it, is, we're parts fitting some of the 3D printed parts that we've made. This looks like a murder scene, honestly. You've got Zaku parts all over the place. Looks like a bomb went off. But really what it comes down to is I've got parts that I've printed out that we are going to be fitting onto this kit, which I have to say, even with the digital calipers, it's been very difficult to get the right fit on some of these parts. And I mentioned it before on stream. There's a fine line, a fine, balance about exposure times when it comes to 3D printing with UV activated resin, and the less exposure time you have in the tank, the finer details you can achieve, and the closer to your actual measurements you're going to be. However, the flip side of that is that your parts are going to be less rigid. Um, Post curing them, you're going to run into some problems as well. We're going to talk about some of that. I'm going to talk about
Hmm.
some of the don'ts primarily. There's do's out there when it comes to 3D printing. I'm going to tell you about all of the don'ts that I've experienced with this little project that I've been working on. Um, and I think I mentioned, like I said on stream before, um, the information out there when it comes to the ideal 3D print times for resin kits and resin parts is really subjective, because you're going to run into issues where, like, the manufacturer says that your optimum exposure times are like 60 seconds for the base and then 8 seconds per 2 millimeter layer or whatever. um but for certain parts and certain applications, you either want to overexpose your resin and make it extra hard when it comes out of the pot, or you want to underexpose it to get finer details, and then you can cure it after the fact. So
Mm.
we're gonna be talking about some of that stuff tonight. Hopefully it won't be too boring for you, Adam.
Ah, no, I'll just continue to ask questions, I guess. But no, it is interesting because, like I've said, I got into 3D printing, got the plastic spool based. So for those out there that are coming across this video and looking to get into 3D printing, if you're interested in this type of stuff, you really need to make sure you're getting the resin printer. You might not realize that when you go buy a 3D printer, you find the cheapest one and get it, and then realize, oh, wait a minute, I'd rather have done resin stuff this whole time. But I mean, there's still a lot of use out of the spool based
Absolutely.
printing anyway.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've noticed this trend going around on Instagram where people are taking like old 2-liter bottles that they've cleared out and like cleaned, and then they like strip
Yeah.
them down and convert them into filament. Man, that is
I saw that today
that's right up
and I
my
was like,
alley,
that's,
like recycling
yeah.
plastic for for the purposes of 3D printing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, do you
Yeah.
think that that's something that you could pull off with the Ender 3?
I think so because I've been thinking about it, and I've seen how there's so much you can do in terms of the material. It's like it almost doesn't matter what it is as long as you can get it to a point that could feed through the tube and go into the extruder and everything. That's
Yeah,
um, I've seen that with wood. I've seen that done with wood. I don't know how that is
fascinating.
done. Yeah, maybe it's like a glue based wood, something that's made beforehand like that, or just to give off that texture.
And one of the cool things that I saw someone do is they took a permanent marker and they actually colored on the 2-liter bottle before they shredded it and, fed it through the extruder. And they actually achieved like different colors and different like gradients because, once you apply the inks to the plastic and then it gets melted down, you start getting these kind of strange color effects out of. So, I mean, you can get
Oh
really
wow!
creative with the PLA printers compared to resin. And one of the
Well, there
things
was
that
yeah.
I'm definitely jealous of is the ability to print things that are kind of articulated. I've seen,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
you can't do that with
that's right.
resin for sure.
Yeah, I printed it was like a llama from Fortnite that was a keychain, but it was in like four pieces, so you can like jiggle it if that makes sense, and it kind of jiggles around because it's articulated. Yeah, and you could just print it right like
Yeah,
that. Uh, pretty interesting.
that's pretty
Yeah,
sweet.
yeah.
So, what I've got here laid out before us is the high grade Revive Char Zaku. Like I said, I chose this kit for this project because it is affordable, it's available, came out 2020. You can find it for like as low as $16, at Target, Hobby Lobby, wherever, model kits are sold. Um, Now, what I am trying to do is, of course, transform it into a high mobility ground type Zaku. And so there's a few parts that we need to make in order for that to happen. There's a shoulder armor, there's the updated shield, because, the standard Zaku shield is kind of a right angle versus a 30-degree angle from the ground type. We have a different breastplate, which the breastplate is where I've had the most success. Um, and you'll see that I've got two piles of parts here on the old desk. We've got one here on the left that these were printed a few days ago. The parts over here on the right were printed today. They are hot off of the UV
Oh,
lamp.
that's
So
cool.
so I don't know how these are going to fit just yet. There's a few problems that I have with them that we're definitely going to have to address on stream, but there could be some solutions in there too. So we'll see. We'll see what we come across with. Um, on the left hand side, we have parts that I printed. They are roughly 6 to 8 seconds per layer. When these came off the printer, they were hard as a rock. They were completely cured. They needed, just a quick rinse and an acetone bath, and they were ready to go. The problem that I had is that a lot of them don't quite fit together as intended. And in particular, when it comes to, see if I can zoom in
Mm.
on some of these parts so that we can get some of the finer details. Actually, might have to just go to manual focus. Autofocus is the enemy of all Gunpla streamers.
I know, right?
All right.
That would be something to perfect. Someone gets the focus, autofocus down perfect.
Yeah, right?
It,
So, let's see. I don't have any of the actual calf pieces that go on this Zaku, but suffice to say there's an inner frame which is kind of nice to work with because the inner frame has a few pegs for us to work with to actually link into. And so I was like, I'm basically going to print a new outer frame armor that will fit onto this inner frame. And getting the diameter of the pegs was probably the easiest part of it, but getting the placement of the pegs, um, that was the trickiest bit.
wow. I cannot believe it. So you literally just printed a Gunpla piece.
I mean, that right there. That could work. There are some problems with it. Obviously, the fit is not seam tight. And there's some things that I want to talk about tonight that we're going to try to address that. The other issue that I'm having is that, it's sitting a little too low. So we would want to take those pegs that are attached to the inside of the leg and move them up. Sorry, I didn't realize that was in frame. Wasn't in frame. So yeah, where the knee armor here is, we probably want that to sit a little bit lower into the leg. So these pegs that are plugged into Gunpla part, we probably need to bring all of them down about 5 millimeters. I measured that out and we actually do have those parts already printed. But as you can see, I had some issues with a couple of the peg holes here. um, is the issues that they're missing. And it's not that
Ah,
they
okay.
weren't there. It's what happened was when I went to rinse off these new parts, the peg holes snapped off like for no reason. Like I breathed on them and they snapped
No.
off. Um, so that was the issue that I had, and of course, the big difference is that these parts over here on the right side of my desk, I exposed them for far less, far less exposure time. They were about 3.5 seconds per layer. So when these parts came off the printer, they were still super pliable. In fact, we had a bit of an issue is that they were so pliable that some of the parts actually peeled off of the build plate as it was printing. And so you've got like, this piece of shoulder armor is just totally warped and worthless.
Mm.
So lessons learned, the parts fitting is actually better because the peg holes and the pegs themselves are a little bit thinner. They fit together a little bit more snugly. But the downside is that everything was much more brittle, much more fragile. So
Wow, that is fascinating. So it's like, I remember asking you last time with the calipers. It's like I'm like, you're gonna measure something that small and digitally recreate it and print it and have it fit. And I guess it not only is it possible, but it's like there's that trial and error to it as well, because
yeah,
it's almost impossible to get it right on the first try.
no, and that's where yeah,
Yeah.
I like to call it trial and terror. Um, no, it's Halloween. Come on, have a sense of humor about this thing.
Yeah. No, that's pretty good actually. A good
Um,
Halloween joke. I like it.
but yeah, I mean, I think that there could be an advantage in some of the failures that we've experienced here today because, for instance, on these new parts that I've printed, maybe the objective shouldn't be to fit all of the pegs because I don't necessarily need all of the pegs. I only need a couple of them in order to affix it to the kit. And as you can
And in
see,
fact, you could almost design the piece in the way to work to your benefit of attaching instead of having it to fit some sort of standard.
exactly. So, I
Yeah.
mean, there are certain peg holes here that we don't necessarily need if we were to zoom in on talking as if I've got a cameraman that's doing the zooming for me. Um, Hey, push in on this.
That would be cool. Like I remotely control the camera.
That would be supremely helpful.
I
Uh,
bet there's a way to do that. There's got to be.
yeah, we're gonna have to consult our producer and see what we can come up with.
Yeah.
So, with this particular part, the leg joints in particular, there are three pegs on either side of the inner frame, a large one towards the base, a small one towards the front, and an even smaller one towards the top. In all honesty, we really only need these two pegs to be addressed because the top one, I mean, it's nice if you wanted to have all three of them accommodated, but you don't necessarily need it. As long as two of them are in place, then you've got you're in business. The reason you would at least want two is because if you only have one, then you're going to have wiggle inside of the part.
Yeah, you don't want wiggle.
Yep, no wiggle room.
You don't want wiggle. I mean, hey, I even get wiggle with the ones I build from Bandai.
Yeah, the professional
ones. but then I realized the instructions were upside down, and I completely built it wrong now. But no, I know what you mean though. When you get that wiggle, and you're like, "Nah, I can't deal with the wiggle," and then sometimes you see that a peg broke, and then that's why the piece is a little loose or something.
Yeah. No, and I was the
yeah.
worst Gunpla builder when I was a teenager. I would just like wrap parts in tape because I'm like, oh, it'll the tightness of the tape is gonna make it fit together better. It's terrible.
Oh, but really, it was probably like a mistake in the construction, right? Yeah, that's actually pretty. That's pretty funny. Because I would do the same thing. Yeah.
But yeah, I see here in the chat, Shirt Lad says that I'm the Brandon Herrera of Gunpla, which I will take that compliment.
Who's Brandon Herrera?
He is the AK-47 guy, the guy that builds like homemade guns. He's actually close to your neck of the woods.
Oh, the 3D printing guy. That 3D prints.
Yeah,
the guns.
I think he's done a couple of 3D printed guns. Okay. I remember that he had a video that was taken off of YouTube because he recreated the gun that was made for Life Inting, a political figure from Japan.
Yeah, that sounds familiar, but I don't remember the details. This is very interesting.
But yeah, I go for like a Gunpla Brad Leone. It's
who's that?
Chef, terrible New Jersey chef that.
Okay.
But now I will say the pauldron I've had a lot better luck with because basically all we've got is a little I can actually fit it back on there. It was on there earlier, I swear. To be honest with you, the prior generation pauldron fit on a lot better. And I think the reason for that is that it had a higher exposure time, but at the time I thought that the problem was that I just was sizing the holes incorrectly. So I expanded the holes by about 0.3 millimeters, which gave me just enough, jiggle, wiggle, whatever you want to call it. Just enough slack.
Yeah. Just enough movement so it doesn't like break off.
Exactly right.
Well, let me ask, how many of those pauldrons did you have to print until you got to this one?
So far I've printed 3 of the spiked pauldrons. There was
that's a good
one. The first generation was printed too small, and that was a scale error that I made because when working in Blender you're working in meters, but when you're working in Gunpla you're working in millimeters, and math is not my strong suit even when it's just done by a factor of 10. But yeah, the second version came out perfectly. This third version, it's lighter. You can definitely feel that there's more material in the thicker print. Yet for some reason, the lighter, airier print does not fit on the peg. For whatever reason that is.
Yeah, and it seems like the two major areas you have to focus on when printing these are you've been bringing this up. It's basically not only the connector piece, but like the print in the end, like the print strength, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, you want some
and,
durability to it too, because you're gonna be posing this thing, you're gonna be handling it, right?
and so as you're going through each generation, each iteration, you're probably tweaking both
Oh yeah.
until, or do you try to get one right before the other?
You probably ought to only adjust one thing so that you're not uh, my brother-in-law likes to describe a golf swing as squeezing a balloon, because if you try to correct too many things at once, you're going to overcorrect
Oh
one thing,
yeah,
and like if you're trying to
that's very good.
squeeze a balloon, you're going to create bulges in other places if you're trying to squeeze out the lumps in a balloon. So it's the same
I
thing
like
here.
that.
Is it's like, I try to address as many things as I know I can fix in one go as I possibly can, which is one of the reasons where it's like, I might only print one leg for one iteration, because it's like I know that it's not going to be right for whatever reason, but
Hmm.
I'm just trying to get the placement of the pegs right. So for instance,
Right.
here I overcorrected because obviously the pegs are too low now. I think I probably dropped them by 7.1 millimeters from the last print, and that is why it is sitting far too low for my tastes. I think that's probably as close as we're going to get to solid focus. Um, so yeah,
That's crazy.
if we were to fit this the way that it is printed, which it actually won't fit on the way that I would like, you know, the print itself you can see is sitting above, which
Yeah.
whereas the previous version sat well below the knee joint. Let me see if I can get them side by side here so that we some before and afters. Now I think I got the hole placement right, like the peg hole placement, but and the interesting thing about this is that because the peg holes are so low on the previous version, you actually cannot fit the part on without unhinging the ankle and bending it down. Kind
Oh.
of a weird quirk. There we go.
Hey, and good to see Gundam Wing, Ian,
Oh,
and Rogue in the chat.
what's
Good to
going
see you
on,
guys.
guys? Rogue posted some sweet looking white dingo mobile suits over on the Gundam Explained Discord today, which
Yeah,
those were looking
it
great.
made me. He was talking about up through 84, that he enjoys that time period. So I
Oh
was
yeah.
doing some research, and there is a story with Char that takes place in 84, where he's in a high mobility Gelgoog or something like that. I
Ooh.
forget. Yes, or was it something else? I don't know. I saved it so I can make a video about it later. But yeah, it was just another interesting story, which where he met Apolly and he got his name Quattro. Yeah, I
Interesting.
want to dive into that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
but but speaking of high mobility, is that the same? There's different types of high mobility we see on mobile suits. What's specifically the one on this one? The
So this is the high mobility ground type Zaku, which is
ground type.
slightly
That's right.
different than, well, and it's pre-origin, because obviously the origin version is
Yeah.
it's very similar to Johnny Ridden's, or sorry, Johnny
Oh,
Ryden.
oh right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Pretty much anything 1 Year War and post and AOZ. Yeah, same. That's solid era to be
Yep.
a fan of. Um, Nothing much, bro. I'm just settling down after running to the store. Hey, happy to have you hang out with the homies.
Oh
And
yeah.
doing some parts fitting. But yeah, so as you can see on the left-hand side of this screen, we've got the former version, which is a thicker, denser, more durable part that was exposed for 6 seconds per layer. On the right-hand side, we've got the part where I lowered the peg holes by about 7.1 millimeters and printed it for about 3.5 seconds per layer. I think that durability wise, they're almost identical. So that's
Mm,
good. That's a good thing because obviously, we can get away with shorter print times and
right.
you know, but obviously I overcorrected for the height adjustment.
Okay.
And that is going to happen.
That's you know what? I thought here's another random thought. This might take more work.
No, no, lay it
What
on me.
if there was some way? Because I know you've already been actually experimenting with this, but set up magnets in a way on these where it's almost like they could be magneted together. I don't know if magneted is a word. I could have said magnetized, but I wasn't really trying to magnetize
Right,
it.
because magnetize already has a definition. Magneted
Yeah.
is more precise to what we're doing here. And I mean,
Yeah. Thank you.
I do have the magnets available. We've got some
That's right. Yeah.
neodymium
Yeah.
rare earth magnets that we could use for such a
But
process.
yeah, so I wonder if you like put it in the hole. Now this is all got sound odd. So guys, we're talking about Gunpla. You put it in the hole so the peg can go in and then go in the
Lock
hole and
onto
fit,
it.
and then yeah. I don't know, just some
Honestly,
random.
in particular, what I would want to do is because we've got some gappage issues, and that's a term that you have coined on your Robot Spirits reviews. I've
Mm,
you coined the term gappage when
gappage.
yeah.
Yep.
So we have some gappage issues when it comes to these parts. So I think that leaving a hole in there, either for a peg or for a magnet, would help alleviate the gappage and bring those edges closer together. Ultimately, I imagine that the final consumer of a product like this, if they were going to get a resin conversion kit for a high grade, they would probably end up gluing this part together anyway.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Exactly.
one of my goals was to create something that was as turnkey as possible. I want it to be, no extra work needed. You don't have to sand anything down.
But that's the good thing about it, because those people that take it seriously to that extent, they could use it and then sand it down, get it to where they want, hide the seam lines, all that work.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, and I encourage people to do that anyway, obviously. Now, one improvement that I did make in this current iteration is that by reducing the print time on our shield, now it actually fits onto the shoulder joint that currently exists. Now, that said, I have to point out that we are
hmm.
going to replace this shoulder entirely because the shoulder on the ground type Gundam has a cutaway on the top right, my right, stage right, viewers left. There's a cutaway on the top of the shoulder, so it doesn't look the same as the standard Zaku shoulder. There's a little bit of a cutaway there. However,
Ah,
the goal is to basically replace this entire piece with a piece that will contain the same polycaps that go into the existing arm. So this was another kind
wow.
of quality of life feature that I wanted to add to this, is that you know 3D printing polycap pieces is not ideal on a resin printer because they're going to be brittle, they're going to be kind of
Ah,
smooth, they're not going to be the kind of rubbery texture that you would expect from a polycap piece out of the box. Or on a PLA printer, you could use materials that are.
I've done that actually.
Oh, you have.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm just now thinking about that. I made little like almost squishy little toys. There was like a little dog. Oh, I made a smoke effect part too for some action
And it's
figures.
kind of
So
flexible.
yeah, you can like push it in. It's all yeah. Well, you know what? Yeah, maybe I need to really, even though I keep saying this, fire up my 3D printer and then start experimenting with that, because I can send those your way. That would cost nothing. Um, to print and ship something that small. So
Exactly right, man. See, you and
yeah.
I could be the 3D
Hmm.
printing Gunpla guys. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
the Principality of Polygon. It's trademark it now. Um,
It's pretty good.
yeah, I mean, I think that resin printing, obviously, you and I have talked about this, is you can get some incredible details, but of course, there's the issue of brittleness. There's the issue of you know, exposure times and things like that you can't address. And then, of course, materials is like you really are
Mm.
limited to. There's like the ABS like material that is just like a harder plastic, but you don't get as fine details. And then you have your
Hmm.
standard resin prints that, you know, for better or worse, you get great detail, but they are highly brittle. They are easy to break. Um, they're great for like D&D miniatures, but they're not ideal for something like Gunpla, something that you're going to be like handling a lot. That's gonna have a lot of movement in the joints. Now that
True.
said, why am I doing this? You might be asking yourself, if it doesn't work for Gunpla, why are you doing it? No, I think that it still works because
Yeah.
obviously, as much as possible, I'm trying to recycle parts that are already in the kit, because I could just 3D print the entire kit essentially, and we wouldn't have to worry about these types of issues. But the
Yeah.
idea is that since it already has poly caps with it, let's just print a piece that fits those poly caps, and then you can pose the shield however you want.
That is pretty cool.
So
I got to say, yeah, you bringing up 3D printing a whole Gunpla. One day you will have to do that. You should just one day decide, you know what, I'm going to 3D print this
whole
entire
thing,
Gunpla.
yeah. I'll even do it like on runners so that I have to clip it out.
Yes, and make the box. And you can't build it until you've made the box. I like the idea of printing it on the runners, though. That was excellent. That
That's what
needs
we're
to
gonna have to
happen.
do.
Yeah.
Um, I apologize for the dogs. They're excited to go outside.
No,
Um,
I mean, hey, they have an opinion. We want to hear everyone. Everyone's
yeah,
equal.
I censor nobody. We answer all questions. All comments are valid. Um, Now I will say I've gone through a few different iterations of the chest plate, and that's because the chest plate has been the most successful part of the print.
Oh,
From the first get go, I have had no problem getting the chest plate to stick onto the existing torso bit. And not only that, but every single iteration of the chest plate has linked onto the piping perfectly. You fit the piping in a little slot right there, and then it wraps around the torso thusly,
wow.
and then it just
I
attaches
can't
to
believe
a
it.
couple of pegs in the front. That has been the easiest, and honestly, I was shocked when I first pulled this guy off the build plate, and I was like, "Hey, this this works."
Dude, probably felt super rewarding. Is that, man? Yeah, that's something I printed out and it worked like that. I mean, just seems like a nightmare having to measure. There's just those pieces to connect.
Now, I
Wow.
probably would have given up
Weird.
if it hadn't worked out so well.
Ah,
Now, the downside of that is that, unfortunately, uh, you know, I printed it with the intent of not replacing the breastplates on the left and right side of the Zaku. So let's get back. So the regular Zaku 2 obviously has these breastplates that sit on the left and right that are usually a different color from the center chest piece. It's usually like black and then green on the sides. Um,
mhm.
Now this works, but it's not exactly what you see in the actual kit. So, or kit, I should say, the actual mobile suit that we're trying to replicate. So I have 3D printed alternative chest plates that
Oh,
have a slight cutaway to them. And the reason it has that cutaway is because that chest plate, the breastplate, is supposed to look something like a goof. It's like an early model
right.
ground type goof. Obviously, the hole in the side, we have recreated that pretty faithfully. And then on the inside, we have recreated the attachment pieces necessary for the actual arm joint that is supposed to fit inside. So,
Wow.
out of the box, you've got, focus in on this guy while we're talking about him. Like I'm getting worse. All right. I think that'll work. So, out of the box, this is the part that we're working with. And surprisingly, the ball joint of this piece is on the inside. So the ball joint connects to the torso, and then on the outside, you have a peg that attaches to the shoulder joint. So it
Hmm.
really, there's like a peg here, but it doesn't have to be a peg. It's kind of a weird design to me
Yeah. Yeah.
because you have a ball joint where you don't necessarily need one. You have a
No.
peg where a
No.
ball joint might be better, and then you have a peg where you could get away with like a stick. There's really nothing.
Yeah. It is very interesting that it did that, unless that has to do with the chest being articulated or the sides being articulated, maybe for the
Exactly. There's a little bit of that chest
yeah.
crunch that you get with some of the newer high grades. So I
Yeah.
tried to replicate that as best as I could, and we're almost there. I would say
Yeah, crazy. That's
we're
well done.
about 75% of the way there, because the thing that I screwed up is I went in and measured this tiny little notch here, if my micrometer shows up on camera or not. So I measured the width of the tiniest little notch down here, which I think is about 0.23 millimeters. It's insanely small. But as you can see, the part itself is actually has like a little dip, so it gets wider towards the center. And so this gap that I created actually needs to be a little bit wider. So
Mm.
right here, we have a gap that's 2.7 millimeters in depth, and it needs to come down probably about another zero point 0.6 millimeters, and then that piece is going to fit in there perfectly, and we're gonna be in business. And that's
Wow.
that's kind of going the extra mile, because the truth
Yeah.
is, like, I think I was the only one that would have noticed that.
Ah. Okay.
But again, this
Impressive.
is why printing and parts fitting is important before kind of shipping these things.
Yeah.
The last thing that I want to show off, and this has been one of the more difficult challenges that I've had, is because the regular Zaku 2 on the backpack, we are looking at, there's an inner backpack here that the pipes fit into. They kind of plug into them like that, and then you kind of you hide where the backpack connects with an outer shell, and that outer shell is just basically a rectangle with a couple holes cut in it.
Mm.
Pretty easy,
Pretty
pretty
cool.
simple.
Yeah.
So I thought, hey, this would be pretty easy to replace with, my thinking was we keep the inner part of the backpack the same, but we replace the outer shell with a backpack that looks like the high mobility type, which is a
Yeah.
little bit more angular. It's got this little antenna on it. The problem is that it also has little fins that cover the outside of the tops of the pipe. And so I was thinking to
Oh.
myself, how am I going to do this? Do I print it in one part and then just kind of have like these exposed holes? And what I decided to do, now this one isn't going to fit because of various reasons. Obviously, this was a failed print in the first place. On this side, this is what it's supposed to look like. It's kind of got like a T cut out of it. On this side, the print failed, and the top of the connector kind of popped out.
Oh yeah.
But it still will illustrate what we're trying to do, which is we're going to take that backpack piece, fit it inside here. And the other part of the issue that we're having here is that the backpack needs to be a little bit narrower to accommodate how narrow the pipes are. But the idea, if I take this off, I'll be able to illustrate it, I think, a little bit more clearly, is that the pipes are going to fit through the holes that we've created here, and they kind of hang snugly, thusly. And then I have these additional little caps that, again, are not going to fit because the sizing is incorrect. but we basically have little caps that are going to cover the tops of.
Yeah, that is very cool. Wow. So that's super impressive. Gotta say. Gotta say.
Yeah, it'd be more impressive if it worked on the first print, but like I said, this is the test fitting
Hey,
process.
it's more impressive because you have a kid. A little kid.
Oh man, yeah. Today was her second day at daycare, and
Oh,
apparently she's
oh, good.
more well behaved for
Other people.
her Welsh babysitter than she is
Oh,
for us.
because she already knows how to use you guys. That's
Exactly
probably what
right.
it is. That's good.
Now, all that is to say, we've got a lot of cool things, cool projects that we're going to be working on here going forward. Let's see. Good, good, good. I do have some don'ts to share with you when it comes to 3D printing because
Yeah.
I've been working on some other Gunpla projects. As you know, there was like somebody said something about Hyzac. I don't know. It seems ages ago since we talked about Hyzacs.
Yeah.
Um, but suffice to say, the Hyzac is still in order. I've also got a couple of diorama pieces that I'm working on, like you said, in between
Nice.
juggling children. But I went ahead and I started 3D printing a hanger diorama that it's a massive piece. It's about 14 by 14 inches and about eight and a
Wow.
half to 10 inches tall. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to land on that, but obviously, we had to do some test prints because test print everything. Oh, thank you, Sayla. And Goose, will you have to glue
Oh, good
any
to
of
see you,
those
Goose.
parts or will they snap into the piping? They will snap into the piping actually. So the idea is that the piping will provide tension on the underside of the part, and then there's actually a little clip that snaps into place. Now it is going to be a brittle clip, so for anyone that uses this kit, I would advise not putting it in until you are ready to paint and done with it. Um,
Mm.
because yeah, I mean, once you pull that guy off, I'm pretty sure I could. I'm not going to do it, but I could snap it pretty easily. I'm pretty sure, honestly, if we were to try and test fit it on without the piping, here is what it would look like. Obviously, I'm going to be holding the stage left, viewer right one in place, but it has these little caps that sit over the top of the piping. But
Man, that looks real
I
good.
mean, like I said, it fits in there without the piping in place anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
so that
nice.
part of it we got right. We just need to make it narrower and maybe make the actual cap wider to accommodate the um girth of the Zaku pipes. Now, as I was saying, we've got
Yeah.
here a plate from the hanger base kit that I'm 3D printing. Um, there's a few things wrong with this that I want to talk about that I want to hopefully uh, prevent people from making the same mistakes that I do. So the two big things you might notice with this, if you look across the top of the hanger base plate here, you might notice there's a bit of an arch here that's kind of like curves off
Yeah.
towards the edges. Now, what causes that is this was printed basically straight down on top of the build plate. And what happens is, the build plate drops down, the resin is exposed to UV light, and then it pulls off and pushes back down, to create layers. These initial few layers along the bottom were not strong enough to resist the pull when they initially popped off of the exposure plate. And so what
Mm.
happened is you got this curvature that was created um just basically by gravity pulling it down. The way you would fix this, there's two different things that you would do. I would first add way more supports on here. So just like loading up the bottom with supports to make sure that 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 bottom layer, that flat layer, is well supported when it's being pulled off. And then of course the other thing you can do is lower the retraction of the build plate. So it's usually set to like a default of um 210. I drop it down to like 160, and basically it just reduces the amount of pressure that's being pulled when you rip the build plate off of the FEP sheet. Um, Now the other problem that you might see with this is that we have some pretty severe bowing going on. The entire plate itself is kind of curving upwards around
Mm,
the outside of the
mm.
around the outside of the the detailed part is kind of scrunched in compared to the
Wow, okay.
outside piece.
Mm.
Now, what that was caused by is that this was actually only exposed for 2.5 seconds, which is insane because if you think about that, this same resin, I've exposed it for 8 seconds, 6 seconds, 3.5 seconds, and 2.5 seconds. And all of them have come out with the same rigidity, roughly the same durability, but vastly different results when it comes to post curing, things like that. So the big problem with this is that when I post cured this, so I took it off of the build plate, I put it in front of a UV lamp. The UV lamp was hitting it from this side, and I had a mirror on this side to try and accommodate it. What happened is this side cured faster than this side, and so it scrunched in and kind of pulled on the
Wow.
outside, which this side stayed softer throughout the curing process. So if you don't have a curing box or a, you know, some type of device that's going to expose your part on all sides to that UV light, what you're going to want to do is slap that part on a rotating base. That way you get equal exposure from the lamp that you're shining on it. Um,
Mm,
and
pretty good.
that is how you would prevent that warping that we've got going on. Now,
Wow.
again, that's why I wanted to test this piece out because I have to print 9 of these. And so if I had 9 that were this jacked up, I would not be making a diorama at all.
Hey, you know what? When those resin things are printed with supports, it reminds me of an asteroid base in Gundam. Because you know how like some of that key art, like in the background, it has all those lines sticking out.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered, it's just like metal fittings, I guess they have all over the asteroid bases. Yeah, it looks just like that. And hey, and again, you made a comment about gravity too. I mean, not only does it mess up resin prints, but also the souls of man. So
That's the truth. That's the truth. Um yeah, and I mean you've experienced supports in PLA printing too. Is like
yeah,
but it's the opposite. It's like
yeah.
you have to have supports to push up
So it doesn't
against
fall.
gravity.
Yeah, to keep it up, and it's weird, like how it works. I don't know if this is true, but sometimes it's really hard to remove supports on the PLA. It's like really hard. And you have to like get it. I have some things I printed where I've never been able to get the supports off.
Oh
So
no.
I've just like, but it's like sometimes there's things you're not really supposed to print, but you do anyway. So then you just make up supports. Yeah, it happens.
Well, and then that's I think part of the joy of it is trying to kind of noodle those things out. Honestly, I think that a lot of the problems that I'm experiencing with the parts fitting on here could be cured with manual supports. Most of the pieces that I printed out, I used automatic supports. Think there were only 2 parts that I printed today that I put manual supports on. One of
Mm,
them was the shield. I know that for sure because this was the first time. Normally, when I print the shield, I print it upright, in order to maximize the number of layers that goes into it. But this time I decided to print it on its side for speed, and it worked really well. I would say that because I manually added supports, especially to the corners, that was what kind of held it in place and made sure that, you know, like that's as flat of an edge as
Yeah.
the as
I mean, that piece looks good. That was like one of the first pieces I picked up on when you were showing them. I was like, wow, that turned out
yeah,
good.
that's exactly what we're looking for. Um,
Yeah.
and that was one of the ones that I did manual supports on. I did automatic supports, which again, I was rushing, which is something you
Oh,
should never do. Obviously, take your time, measure twice, cut
yeah.
once, all that good stuff that your parents try to teach you and you don't listen.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
but yeah, I mean, the legs were auto supports, and what happened was, they were probably at a 45-degree angle this way because I wanted to maximize the amount of, with resin printing, you want to have the supports going upwards, technically downwards, towards the part that's not going to be exposed, because then obviously any kind of pock marks you might get from cutting the supports off are going to
Right.
be
Yeah.
invisible. Um, so if we had this guy at a 45-degree angle, basically everything from here to about here, everything from like that first third is going to be slightly pulled out because of A, gravity, and B, pulling off of the FEP sheet. And, you know,
Interesting.
just gotta have to, you have to address those things when you're adding supports. Otherwise, I think that the parts themselves are kind of in the right place. It's just getting the print settings down and getting the placement of some of these,
Pegs
the
lined up.
pegs,
The pegs, the holes. Yeah.
whatever we need to do to affix these
To
parts
attach it.
to the Gunpla itself.
Hey, coming from someone I think I have above average intelligence in 3D printing in general. I got to say it's pretty remarkable what you've shown me.
I
If anything was to inspire me to start 3D printing again, it's seeing this just because it's with Gunpla just all the different things you can do. It's
I'm
crazy.
just honestly surprised that there isn't a bigger one. Maybe there is, and I just haven't been invited to it. A
Oh
bigger
no, I know what you mean,
3D
like a bigger
printing
presence
Gunpla
of
community.
stuff being available. Yeah, because so far it's more of if you want some resin pieces, you gotta like pay a lot,
Yeah,
and they're not as it's almost like they're like it's like super niche within the top tier gunpla builders that a lot of the average builder probably doesn't know about that. But I think this approach is a way to add more customization or customizing options to the average gunpla builder who might just do a straight build and panel line. And
and that's
yeah,
that's my hope is
yeah,
basically kind of bringing that upper tier experience down to a level that guys like I can enjoy because
yeah.
I'm not about, well, I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm not about to sit here and paint a perfect grade, and I'm like, well, I've got a perfect grade Zeta that I need to build and paint. So
Yeah.
that's but
Hey, that could be its own couple few dozen streams.
yeah,
You
just
know,
one or two.
that'd be fun.
Um, but yeah, and again, that's kind of what we do here in the Madhouse of Hatter is experiment, tinker around with some stuff that we're hoping is going to make Gunpla life easier. Honestly, it would be kind of interesting to, thinking about it now, maybe instead of creating entire conversion kits, just creating conversion parts. Things
Yeah.
that could, it's like, say all you needed was a couple of goof shoulder pauldrons.
Hmm.
We've got that, and we've got it with, you know, if you want a peg fitting, we've got peg fittings. If you want ball joints, we've got ball joints. But that's it. And honestly, I think when we first started this project, one of the questions we got in chat was, could you scale this up to a master grade level? And the short answer is yes. The long answer is that the reason that I'm kind of doing all of these parts fittings and these specific holes and pegs and fittings is so that it's designed to match the specific kit. I could just print this and then, using whatever spare polycaps I have and some putty, I could fix this onto any of the
Oh
Gunpla that I
yeah,
have. That's not a problem. We're
yeah,
we're trying to create something that's a little bit more, like I said, turnkey. If you like that phrase, um, what's another good word for just
yeah.
kind of
I know what
out
you
of the
mean. It's like
box?
yeah, it's like reusable. Yeah, yeah. Out of the box, I guess is more. It's like a reusable standard that aligns with what's already out there. Just so you don't have to. So you can get it fitted together the way it's intended in the end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that makes it a little bit easier on folks, hopefully.
Yep. Yeah.
But that
You
is the
should.
progress that we've got going on with this Zaku. I think that we're almost there. I'll be
Yeah.
honest with you. It's looking really close. Probably I would say not the next print, not the next fitting, but the following fitting is going to be spot on. We are going to have a high mobility ground type Zaku ready to pose and ready to rock. I might even paint it before I show it off on stream. Who knows?
Dude, that would be sick. Just yeah, seeing the amount of work you've done already is pretty awesome. I
I, I, and,
can't wait to see
and I
this
love it,
done.
man. I love tinkering around with this stuff. To be
Yeah.
honest with you, and I think we have some room to experiment and have some fun with the final build as well.
And you know what? Just to add one thing, I bought a 30-minute mission kit over the weekend and a couple of their extra little armor parts just to try it out. And
So
they're not universal.
and it blew
It's
my
so
mind
dumb.
when you said that because I was like, the whole
Yeah.
point of the 30-minute missions was it's like, oh yeah, they use these universal peg joints that like you can snap anything onto them.
I mean, you would have to buy. It's like you could if you bought all the kits, and then you could change the heads around to a different body. So you could, but then you can't just buy one and then buy a bunch of armor, you know. But
Gotcha.
just looking at it, like there's so many options with that, fitting.
Yeah.
If you ever wanted to do whatever you wanted to, you could make this into anything with the fittings that are all over it. It's pretty cool.
See, and I'm glad you brought that up because let's see.
Like here's a shield that has a little hole in it, and then the other side it's a peg, and yeah, just every little accessory has these fittings. So
Now, there's something to be said about that too, because honestly, having too many peg holes and too many fittings obviously kind of makes it look like Swiss cheese, right?
oh yeah, yeah,
You kind of
that's
get
true.
a strange um counter effect where like all of the parts kind of you get the same effect from like overly articulated action figures that have like a
Yep.
ball joint. It's like two ball joints at the elbow, two ball joints at the shoulder, and basically the whole thing is just all ball joints.
Right, yeah, and sometimes the engineering, especially S8 Bandai does this with SH Figure Arts and with the Robot Spirits to a degree, and it's trying to hide the articulation within like armor or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I am glad that you brought up the 30-minute missions because I did actually recently invest in some of and you'll have to forgive this one because it's a little bit broken, but some of the Techo toys. We've talked about this brand in the past. Techo Toys makes these miniature mech figures that are almost entirely ball joints. This one is not completely assembled, as you can obviously tell, but I wanted to kind of see how their ball joints worked and how I might
Mm,
use that for my own projects. And honestly, I was a little disappointed to find out that most of their kits are um they have the same pelvis and the same legs and arms, but they have different torsos. And that's really the big difference. Now, to the point of like 30-minute missions, that's nice because then the parts are kind of interchangeable. You can kind of swap things on and off. but you're not really getting a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
interchangeability if the arms and legs are the exact same between kit.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has really cracked the code on that except for Lego. It's like, or that Snap Ships, which I know you're familiar with, but I
Yeah,
have most of them. They're just like these cool blocks that you snap together to build ships, and it's like there needs to be more of that where it's like specific IP with proprietary connectors, but they have a whole line of things so that you can just build. It's like, yeah, Legos, but a little more specific into a theme.
yeah. I'm
Yeah,
totally with you. And
yeah,
you're speaking my language. Honestly, it's a little disappointing sometimes when it's like you get a couple of different high grade Gunpla and you're thinking, "Oh, I'm going to take this backpack and put it on this kit instead." And it doesn't work.
yeah. It's funny. There's some areas where that it's like you think it would be obvious between some kits they could make things interchangeable, and then they're not. But it could be to sell another kit. So yeah.
Could be. But yeah, I think I have held you up long enough tonight, and we've talked about a lot of different topics here when it comes to 3D printing and Gunpla, and just kind
Yeah.
of, I mean, the state of the toy industry is kind of neat because, like, obviously you can have a brand like Teco Toys where it's like, we're gonna sell you an $11 STL, and you can 3D print your own
Yeah.
toy. Yeah,
Yeah. That is pretty cool.
that's
I think when they first came out, I think they were originally going to sell a toy line. And then I think they changed their model because I had been following them for a while and they kept showing off these badass mechs. I was like, oh, I can't wait. And then, yeah, I hear from you that they sell these STLs. That's
yeah.
interesting.
Which is pretty cool. I mean, I think
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
love the joint design that they have worked on. Honestly, the ball joints that they designed are way better than the hinge joints that they designed. The hinge joints, almost every single one that I've had on, I only bought two of the um of the mechs that they have on offer, and every single one that the hinge joints would snap off.
Oh,
And
wow.
that could be down to my
Not cool.
print settings, that could be down to my resin.
Oh,
Um, what's interesting, and again, this is kind of the fascinating thing about 3D printing, is like I said, the manufacturer settings for this resin are 8 seconds per layer, 60 seconds at the base. Teco Toys recommends 4 seconds per layer, 30 seconds at the base.
mm,
And then the Amazon retailer that I bought the resin from recommends 2.5 seconds per layer and 25 seconds per at the base. So having printed parts at 3.5 seconds, 4 seconds, 6 seconds, 3.5. I've printed every iteration, and I can tell you there are noticeable differences in the post print quality for sure, because obviously,
okay.
you know, fresh off of the build plate, if it's only been exposed to the light from like 2.5 to 3.5 seconds, it's a very pliable resin. The pock marks from the supports are not as noticeable, so that's a good thing. But they're extremely fragile parts. There's not enough material there to
Mm,
really support what's going on. So, like, for Gunpla applications, my thinking is that you want to make your joints and sockets oversized. So, like, let's say you have a 3 millimeter peg, you might want to make like a 3.2 millimeter socket for that 3 millimeter peg to fit in. Crank that thing up to 4.2 millimeters and overprint it, because what you're going to get is a nice hard print that actually fits and is not going to just like warp on you for no reason.
mm, okay. So it's keeping account in the size that you're not necessarily printing one to one,
Exactly. So
but yeah,
yeah, taking into account that that your joints are not going to be printed at the exact scale that you're modeling them at. I
yeah.
think that is going to be the secret sauce to get this kit in particular to work. And that's my next step, is to basically take all of everything that I've learned in these 3 iterations and say, I'm going to take all of these parts and I'm going to design them to be overprinted so that they are hard and like dense resin when they come off the plate.
It's good. That's good. You need that on your website. Like the do's and don'ts, and those do's are good do's.
I hope so. I hope so. But yeah, I think that this has been an exciting series, and we've got some
Yeah.
exciting stuff coming up down the pipe because next week we have an explosive guest that
Mm.
I'm almost scared to announce him early. But yeah, we're gonna be running an hour later next week, so 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. But we're gonna have one of the Gunpla bastards himself on the stream. Eddie from Eddie, aka the Sank Kingdom. We're gonna be talking some Gunpla stuff, and I love having third chair guests on here because we can kind
Yeah.
of shoot the old shit.
And when I was first doing this stuff, he reached out to me on Instagram, and we did a live, and it was cool. Yeah, those guys always a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they wrapped up their season this Monday. Had a lot of fun with that. So, yeah, we're
Yeah.
looking forward to that next week. And of course, tomorrow we've got the Gundam Explained podcast, 8:30 p.m.
That's right.
Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Central.
That is right.
Do you have any previews for what we're going to be talking about?
Yes, there was something I have in mind, but I forgot. But I have it in my notes or something. But there's stuff because I know there's something like, oh, this would be perfect. But there's gonna be shenanigans.
Yeah, I don't want every week to turn into let's talk about Witch from Mercury because
Oh yeah, that almost happened because I was thinking, okay, this week we'll talk about episode 2. It's like, wait, nah. I mean, I just did episode 2 video, and when it first came out, I mean, probably a little bit of like, oh, that was neat that
yeah,
happened, but yeah,
especially
we're gonna have
especially
variety.
at big big pivotal plot moments. That's a good time
Right.
to talk about G Witch. But
Yeah.
that said, like I'm enjoying G Witch so far. I see you are as
Me
well.
too. Yep.
It's I love something new that's gonna draw in some new viewership.
You know what? In fact, even my wife is enjoying it to the point to where she's like, "Well, let's watch the next episode." And I'm like, "Well, this is one of those weekly releases." And she's like, "I hate that." She's so used to,
What do you mean
the
it's not like
seasons.
Netflix where you can just watch the whole season?
Yeah. So that's a good sign, though.
Yeah.
I think it is. I mean, I'm really wanting to keep knowing what's happening next. They're doing a good job with that.
Yeah.
And it's a little different from, in a way, if I'm thinking of like the old Gundam shows, back in the 70s and 80s, where it was almost there was an overall story, but you never really, who knows what the next story is going to be about. Whereas this, there's some threads we're wanting to see opening up. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I try to put myself in the mentality of being in 1979 and watching this show coming out like once a month, and you're like,
oh, is that how often it was? It was just once a month.
I don't think it was once a week back then. Those
Wow.
syndicated series, and chat will obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the original 1979 Gundam was like, well, no, it had to be more. It had to be once a week.
I mean, it was 50
Oh yeah,
episodes.
50 episodes. That would
Oh,
take up
yeah,
the whole
that's
year.
yeah, but yeah, let's see, 79, 80. The first movie didn't come out until yeah, maybe it was within a year.
So it
So
had to be
maybe it
within
was a
1 year.
week.
So it
Yeah,
had to be once a week. I mean, imagine, this generation can't imagine waiting once a week
I
to
know.
watch to watch the next
I know.
episode.
You know what? I don't know if it's just my how I am personally, but like even now I can't binge watch anything. Like I'll watch 3 episodes of something and then it's like I need a break.
Same,
I, yeah.
same. I'm not a binger for sure. I
Yeah.
kind of need
I
time
appreciate it
to
though. I get
process
it.
what I just watched.
Yeah. Yeah. And then really it's like, I didn't like that. Nah. And then I won't spend my time on it.
Yeah, you ever get in that mode where you're like, I just watched 11 episodes of something I really didn't like?
Yeah, that's or sometimes it's like I forced myself to like it because now I want to know what happens. And really I don't like it.
That's even worse.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I think that it's nice to experience that as an adult in current year. having
Yeah.
to anticipate something coming out as opposed to just
It- right. In Jedi Sailor, by the way, is saying it was 42 episodes.
42
Oh,
episodes.
43 counting Doan's Island. Yeah. Totally forgot about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and they had a couple of production breaks because of Yasuhiko getting sick. And
Yeah.
so, there was obviously some issues there where they had to swap in other animators and other character designers. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the entire show did happen entirely in 1979. So, yeah, it had to be weekly, if not
Yeah. And
with a couple of
yeah.
breaks. And
And that reminds me that manga that came out, the men who created Gundam, excellent.
yes.
I read that. It's a fast read. I guess manga is a fast read in general, it seems. But even though they seem like they're really thick, I tend to go through them real quick. But hilarious. It tells the facts, but it does it in a funny way.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's not like it's making up stuff, but it is kind of embellishing and exaggerating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love those types of retellings where it's like, you know, we can all appreciate the types of office drama and office humor that might go on in production studio.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but yeah, I mean, dude, like I said, I'm excited. I'm excited about tomorrow's podcast. I'm excited about G
Yeah.
Witch. I'm excited about next week. We're gonna be talking to Sank Kingdom, and I hope you guys are excited about the rest of your week. I hope you guys have a great
Yeah.
evening and a great rest of your week. Adam, thank you as always for keeping me on task while I'm babbling about,
No problem.
you know,
Oh
retraction
no, thanks for
speeds
having me.
and resin. And
Dude, it's like its own lore. There's like this world building that happens when I'm on your cast. It's
exactly right. We keep it interesting.
yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys for keeping the chat lively. We will catch you both tomorrow and next week.
Yep.
Peace.
See y'all.